Hi guys and girls, welcome to another My Friendly IT Guy video. In the last episode we covered my amazing God's View script, the command line parameters and usage and the resulting Excel file. In this video we look at the code. Going from the top of the script, we see some information that I've just put in. Basic information requires PowerShell and Excel unless you want to use the CSV output method. It creates and opens a new Excel file, populates the headings, and populates all the content. It does ping tests. It does DNS, NS lookups against each server, obtains date server environment, business owner details for each server from an external CSV file, which is optional. Runs WMI queries against each machine and populates the Excel or CSV file. Now, there's a note: when customizing this script for a new environment, look out for the following and make appropriate changes throughout the code. So basically, there are a few places where you can just make sure details that are provided are customized to your environment, but there really shouldn't be too much that you need to do. If anything, this will run out of the box straight away, copy and paste, and it will work in your environment. So these are the command line parameters. They're all explained in the help file. We've got some functions that basically scan a domain. So this particular function, if we check how many times it's referenced, 5. So we can have a look at that. So basically when we target a specific domain, it will do a scan domain check. So it's going to call that function with that particular domain name, which could be mycompany.local. And it will basically check it. Is it the current environment, which basically just scans the current environment using the get AD domain command, and it will basically return the current domain name. Otherwise, is it OSDOM, for if it's a particular bottling company that you work at and your domain is called osdom.local or osdom, or is it bottlingcompany.com? Or is it just default? And it's none of the hard-coded, and it's basically, you're just going with the default option, which is going to be for 99.99% of you. So that's that function outlined. Determine host, pretty basic. There's a predefined registry provider defined in here, and basically it is referenced when the registry is queried for that particular series of numbers. And it returns the Hyper-V host name. So if your target computer is a virtual server or a virtual computer running on a Hyper-V host, then it will query this particular location and return the Hyper-V host's host name. So this adds a particular item in the Excel file, which I think I can show you if we scroll across here to the beginning. Hyper-V host right there. If this had been a virtual server on a Hyper-V host, then we would see the Hyper-V host's name in that column. So basically that outputs the help text we saw, which was just encapsulated in those @ symbols. So everything between this little @ symbol and this one is the output if the help command is parameter is specified. If the alternate path command line parameter is specified, then you are prompted to enter an alternative safe path, and it is then validated to make sure that it works. So it will basically do a test path of that alternate path, and while it's not true, it's going to keep prompting you and saying, nope, that's an invalid path. Please specify the path again, and if it's valid and you've put c:\temp and c:\temp exists, then the alternate path is validated and it jumps out of that while loop and basically uses that to either save the Excel file to or the CSV output file to. If the server list command line parameter was specified, then it will assume that you've added a path to the actual text file, so a full path, c:\temp/serverlist.txt, for example, and it will validate that. Otherwise, it's going to say, nope, proceeding with Active Directory because you did not specify a server list text file. and that is the default mode. So a server list method of 1 is the default, where it actually tries to get information from Active Directory. This script was designed for Active Directory environments and not for your home environment, but again, it does work if you use the -no main command line parameter, which is here. So if no domain is not specified, then we are going to import the Active Directory module. Now this is because this PowerShell script was written a decade ago, and back then we had to import modules such as Active Directory. Now if the scan domain exclamation mark before it means not, so if there is no scan domain, then we're just going with current. We're going to set scan domain to be the string current. I could have put anything I wanted in there, but we've just put the current domain, and basically we run through some logic and say, if the scan domain is not equal to current, then we're going to do this. Otherwise, it throws an error and it even exits the application. If the current domain is other than not current, so anything else, then it will actually try and get that particular scanned domain name. So if you've put in mycompany.local, it will be get ad domain mycompany.local, and we'll try and get that, and it will return the DNS root and the distinguished name of your domain and save those in this domain variable. There is then 2 global variables that are used within the code and within the functions of the code, which contain those 2 values. And basically here we have some more error information being thrown via write host commands, very basic write host, something within double quotes, and choose your coloring for that output. And again, another output command, another error, and it basically says we're exiting because we didn't meet the criteria. So here, if not scan domain, and this is the else, so if scan domain was specified, then we're going to try and check what that domain is. So you put in mycompany.local, we're going to go to this function, and we're going to pass in this variable, which could be mycompany.local as a string, and we're going to jump around to that function, and we will actually validate that that domain exists and return back current if nothing was specified. So the next part is if the server list method equals to 1, which is the default. So this is Active Directory. This whole section here, it basically relates to if Active Directory method is specified, then first, is it this bottling company domain? No, it's not, because it's not going to be unless you've customized that to be mycompany.com or mycompany.local, and that is the name of your domain. And then you can basically customize some of these filters. So get Active Directory computer, filter, name starts with A, or name has BCOAU asterisk in it. So basically, if the computer host name starts with A or starts with BCOAU, and the operating system is not like blank, or operating system is not like Linux, and operating system is not like CentOS Linux, and it's not like Windows 10, and it's not like Windows 8, and not Windows 7, and not Windows XP, then basically we're getting all other operating systems, so Windows Server 2003, Windows Server 2008, 2008 R2, 2012, 16, 2019, and so on. We're going to get the properties such as canonical name, created, IP version for address, modified computer object date, the operating system, the service pack, the computer object password last set, and a description from Active Directory, and we're going to add it to this array and keep all that information. Now, if we've specified all AD computers as a command line parameter, then this filter on this get Active Directory computer is vastly different. So we're not filtering based on these very specific details, we're just saying give me everything. So filter asterisk, give me anything that's in Active Directory. I don't care what operating system it is, just give me it all. And otherwise we fall back to operating system is like Windows asterisk server or Windows 2000 server. So basically anything that is a server operating system is covered by this particular filter. And the end result is that all servers will basically contain everything in your Active Directory depending on which filter was chosen. And the same applies here, but this is just if your domain is not bottlingcompany.com, then you've got the same two options down here. Basically, we're going to be choosing by default Windows Server or Windows 2000 Server and give me everything about those computers. Call Computers becomes a new array containing all the host names of all the servers that we've just obtained from Active Directory, or all the computers. And basically we're going to run through all of the computers and do various ping tests and so on and cycle through them. Now, if exclude these was specified that command line parameters at runtime, then it will contain a text file list of all the computer host names you wish to exclude, and basically this chunk of code here will run through and exclude any from your Active Directory list that appear in this exclude these array, and they'll be removed from scope of runtime. Now, if your domain was lc.local, or what are the other options here? There's a couple. Nope. If this is the LC domain, then this is where the CSV files that I mentioned before that provide additional information come into play and are imported along with the other obtained information. The next section is creating a new Excel object. So a lot of the next hundreds of lines of code are basically creating Excel file parameters that are just copy and pastes of each other, but because you're going to be creating many columns and things on the fly, it's mostly hard-coded. So if we're not outputting to CSV output, so if not CSV output, then yes, we are going with Excel. We're going to basically create a new Excel instance. We're going to associate it with a name. We're going to set it to be visible if the invisible parameter was not used. So if invisible, was used as a runtime parameter, then visible will be false. Otherwise, it's visible is true. We're going to check the current process ID for that Excel file against all the other Excel process IDs, and we will therefore know which Excel process ID is the current one. So you might have multiple Excel files already open, but because this script has just created a new Excel process ID, it's going to compare that against the previous list, and it will obviously know which process ID relates to the brand new instance of the Excel created as a result of running this script. So therefore it will not accidentally terminate one of your other Excels that you may have open when you're running this script. And so here, the next 5 or so lines repeat over and over and over a lot. And basically they are just creating some basic column variables, parameters, whatever you want to call them, based on all of the WMI obtained information. So pretty much there is instructions on how to modify this, but that's going advanced. The next section performs all the main functionality, gathering via Active Directory and WMI queries. So we covered call computers as being the array of all the host names of all the computers that we're going to target. And basically we're going to go through each one, through each string computer, through call computers. So if the server list method is 1, which is Active Directory, or if it's 2, then a server text file was used, then we're going to basically get Active Directory information for each computer, and we're going to store that in a variable, which we're then going to either add to the Excel file or to the CSV file. If we're not skipping Active Directory checks, another double negative, then we are going to get Active Directory information. So we're not skipping, so we are getting. So the get AD computer commandlet will do its thing. If skip Active Directory checks is true, we're going to delimit on the canonical name of each computer and basically start creating objects, and fully qualified domain names and things like that, which basically get added to the Excel file as additional information. And we're going to basically ping, using the test connection PowerShell command, the fully qualified domain name. So if the host name was, mycomputer123, then the fully qualified domain name is that host name plus the canonical name, which includes the domain name, so mycompany.local, for example. And we're going to ping that. And if the ping tests are successful, then we will basically do additional tests. We will do DNS lookups and so on. So it does get a bit tricky where if we're skipping ping tests, then the code will actually, the code execution will vary slightly differently. But we'll cover that when we get to that section. So here, anytime you see Excel sheet .cells.item integer row and some value, this is the code actually writing to a particular cell in the Excel file. The alternative, of course, is it's being added to a CSV hash array, and basically you won't get to see that on the fly. You will have a CSV file output at the end of execution. So a lot more obtaining information. Here is the skip ping, or if the IP address was not equal to blank, or if it was not a loopback address, or if WMI was not skipped, then we're going to attempt to get the OS details. So we're going to use the get WMI object command with the Win32 operating system class against the fully qualified domain name. We're going to attempt to get the WMI information, and if it's successfully returned, then we're going to basically dive deeper into that data and try and dig out some more information and put that into the Excel or CSV file. So boot up time, for example, we're going to check the registry for various things. We're going to, this is all the registry stuff for checking if there's a reboot required or a reboot pending, for example. So depending if you've had Windows updates installed or SCCM pushed out updates or anything else, and there is a pending reboot that will be reported in the Excel file or the CSV. And basically for each item based on this, it will say reboot pending, only ignorable system file renames or system file renames due to patching. So ignorable system file renames, they happen pretty much every single time. Any changes to DLLs or system libraries or anything causes this to be flagged true, but those reboots are not, critical. You don't need to have the reboots. They can go on for weeks, months without any problem. Whereas other system file renames may need to be done in a due course. You don't want to leave these kinds of reboots for too long after you've patched the system. You want to be doing rebooting regularly and quite soon after patching. And then we've got this reboot pending Windows update, or reboot not required, all okay. All the other checks up here have passed and there is no pending reboot. Of course, if the registry access failed, then you will get some errors: unknown registry, remote access registry failed, and so on. Again, if CSV output is not requested, then we're writing this data to Excel directly, or alternatively, we are adding it to the hash table for the CSV, which will get dumped at the end. Next, we're doing a WMI of the Windows 32 BIOS class. We're going to connect to that class and attempt to get hardware details, such as, is it Microsoft? Is it a VMware ESX VM? Is it a Hyper-V VM? Is it a HP or a Dell computer, and so on, and we're going to dump that. Again, next WMI query, we query the Windows 32 processor class, and here is some very fancy algorithm work to determine the number of cores, number of logical processors, and to determine how many sockets you have, how many logical processors you have, and how many multi-threaded threads you've got basically running for each CPU core. Next is we're going to query the Windows 32 physical memory or RAM class, and get all the dim information. So again, we're just querying, we're not doing anything other than getting that information and dumping it to Excel or the CSV. Next, we query the Windows 32 network adapter configuration class and get all the details about NICs. Now, basically, because I wanted the hard drive logical disk data to be dynamically expanding at the end of the Excel file, you can't have multiple Excel columns expanding dynamically. So I've hard coded that you can only have up to 5 network adapters, and you'll get 10 columns of information per adapter. So for each one of the 5 adapters, we're going to get all these different details: IP address, subnet, is DHCP enabled, what's the default gateway, what's the DNS search order, is WINS being used, what's the MAC address, and move on to the next network adapter and continue repeating for all of them. And then finally we get to Windows 32 logical disk class for WMI, and we're going to get some basic information about each one, including the drive name, the device ID, the free space percentages, and so on, and dump that to the Excel file. And if the skip WMI command line parameter was specified, then of course all of this WMI information would have been omitted, and you will not have any of that. You will only have the Active Directory details. We're not going to run through that. And then you've got some custom environments. So let's say if your environment is lc.local, so feel free to change this lc, just limited scope. You can change that to be, my company. Just make sure you do a replace all. So you would do Control H, change lc to be my company .local, and you will replace all. There's only a couple, and save that. And so now you can actually put custom subnets for your environment. So depending on your Active Directory sites and services subnets, you can put in the 3 octets of each site subnet and specify a hard-coded name against each subnet. So, if you've got a base of operations in Hong Kong, Indonesia, or Victoria, you put in the address, the subnet for that. And if you've got vpl.com.au, which is just a made-up name, then basically you might have these subnets. Now, if this is a real domain on the internet, then I apologize, it has nothing to do with vpl.com.au, whoever you are. I've never heard of you. But basically these subnets might correspond to these sites that they might have around the country, or even New Zealand, and so on. Basically the next parts are checking responses to various queries and setting the different settings. So was the connectivity for that particular computer okay, or did just WMI fail, or was there a DNS fail, or did both DNS and WMI fail, or did ping and DNS fail, so that computer was just unreachable, or was it just ping fail? So that gets added into the Excel file, and we saw that here as one of the early columns here: ping and DNS fail, or ping fail, or WMI fail, and so on. And I think we're very towards the end of the file. So if the CSV output parameter was not specified, we're going to add a filter and auto fit all the columns before we close that Excel file and save it. And basically here we've got some hard-coded save file paths. Unless you've used the alternate path command line parameter, then we'll be outputting to these paths, which all get output in the PowerShell here. So Excel file saved to this location, and you basically go to that location, and there is your Excel file. And that's it. The CSV output is also dumped to the automatic save file. So the header is dumped first, then the results appended to the same file. And basically, there is a copy of the file made so that in case you accidentally delete one, but really the reason for that is there is a primary file with just a generic name that is retained, so you can always refresh that same file if you've got a shortcut link to that file. It will always be that. Otherwise, the date and time get added into the file name. So each time will be a different file name. So that way you can continue to use the same shortcut or the same quick launch pinned item to access updated versions of this spreadsheet. And that's it. Basically here it outputs the final information and tells you some basic information such as the program execution completed, this is how many seconds and minutes it took, the process ID that was killed, so you can verify that in Task Manager, and the Excel file that was saved. And basically that is the God's View script outlined in a nutshell. So I invite you to use it. It is 100% safe to use in your environment. Feel free to just copy and paste it to your domain controller and run it. You will see that it will basically make sure you use the CSV output command line parameter, of course. So in your environment, you would basically go -help, and you would go, yep, okay. From the top, no, I don't want to use a server list because I've got an Active Directory environment. No, I don't have multiple domains. I don't want to target a specific domain. I just want to go with the current domain, so I don't need to specify that. No, I don't need to exclude anything. I'm not going to specify that. Nope, I'm happy with the default location. Don't need to specify that. As you can see, these are all command line parameters that really you don't need. They're just there for extra functionality. So no, we don't want an invisible Excel because we're going to output the CSV. Naming convention, we don't care. We just want everything. So we're actually going to use this command line parameter. We're not going to skip WMI. Maybe we'll skip ping. So we can do skip ping. Yes, we want all AD computers. And yes, we want CSV output. So they're the 3 command line parameters you would run, and we can run that right now. And of course, that will work in your environment, but I don't have an Active Directory environment here. So for me, we will basically change that to be no domain, but still use the CSV output. And we will see a slightly different progress. So rather than seeing Excel being populated on the fly with different cells, it just puts a little dot per computer that's processed or audited. And in the end, it will basically output the CSV file to the same directory. Now for this particular machine, WMI is blocked, so it is going to time out. And there it is, it's timed out. Failed, the RPC server is unavailable. So it's going to dump out the CSV file, and there you go, and it's completed. So it's failed WMI queries for 2 machines, and that's because one of them is actually powered off, the other one is getting blocked. The file has been saved, so we can actually just open that file up. Opened on a different screen. Now we can actually just copy that straight away into an Excel file. So we're actually going to open one of these other worksheets, paste it in, and of course you don't have the formatting, the filters, or the fancy colors, but all the same content is all there. And that CSV file you can save as an Excel file, copy it to a machine that has Excel, and run that on a weekly basis and basically do trend comparison analysis and see if any servers or computers in your environment are running low on disk space, or have other issues, or have misconfigurations, or you just want to keep an eye on things. So I hope you've enjoyed this demonstration. The script is available in its full on my website. If we basically go to myfriendlyitguy.com, it will redirect to .com.au. We can go to PowerShell scripts here, click on the Windows Active Directory environment server WMI auditing God's View script, link there, and scroll down, and there it all is. I'll put a link to that, of course, down below. So please like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below if you've got any questions or issues with running the script. I will definitely get back to you. I hope it saves you in some way and makes your life a little bit easier. Enjoy. Thanks everyone.